This man traveled to Myanmar as a tourist and found himself at the very epicenter of a devastating earthquake. Death seemed inevitable, but the moment his soul left his body, he was taken by Jesus and returned with a terrifying message about the future of America. So what exactly did he see? Watch this video to the end because this warning might be the final chance for an entire nation. And here at Eternal Bible Stories, we believe that every genuine testimony is a wake-up call, and our mission is to share these stories to reignite faith, spark hope, and remind the world that God is still moving in the midst of us. If you believe the world needs to hear these truths, please like and subscribe to stand with us on this journey. And now, let's listen to his testimony. My ordinary life before everything changed. My name is Daniel. I'm 56 years old and I live in Oregon. Before everything happened, I had a life that many people would envy, a small interior design company I built from scratch, a cozy home near the forest, and plenty of free time to read, go fishing, or explore interesting places around the world. I never really considered myself a religious person. I grew up in a Christian family and went to church as a child, but the older I got, the more it all felt disconnected from modern life. I didn't hate God, but I didn't feel like I needed Him either. I believed in goodness. I believed that if I lived kindly, hurt no one, and tried my best every day, that would be enough. I once told a friend, if there is a God, surely He'll understand that I'm doing good, and that should count for something. What I didn't realize was that I was living a good life, but an empty one. Toward the end of last year, I began to feel lost. There wasn't any specific reason. Everything just suddenly felt meaningless. Work no longer excited me. My old hobbies didn't bring any joy. One evening, I sat by the window and asked myself, is there more than this, or is this all there is? I decided to leave the US for a while, not to run away, but to search for new inspiration. I thought, everyone needs a break sometimes. A moment to step away from work, from money, or simply from the daily rush. Myanmar came to me like a strange suggestion. I didn't know much about the country except for a few images of temples and ancient landscapes, but something inside me kept urging, go. There's something waiting for you there. So after doing a bit of research, I booked a ticket. A 2-week trip to rest, explore, and, if I was lucky, to find inspiration again in both my work and life. In the days leading up to the flight, I felt constantly restless and anxious, probably a normal feeling before a long journey. But I had no idea that what I was seeking would come to me at the edge of death, indifference toward the spiritual. Let me say this first, I never considered myself someone who hated religion. I didn't mock people who went to church, nor did I join debates about faith or write those online rants like, is God even real? I simply didn't care. To me, belief in God was something for other people, those who were emotionally fragile, hurt, or needed something to lean on when they had nothing else. As for me, I had a job, some savings, decent health, and a life that was for the most part peaceful. I didn't feel the need for anything metaphysical to carry me forward. Honestly, I used to think as long as I lived kindly, didn't harm anyone, stayed moral and generous, that was spirituality. Whether I believed in a higher power or not wasn't really important. I had traveled to many religious countries, Thailand, Nepal, India. Walked into breathtaking temples, stood before Buddha statues, snapped a few pictures, and walked out again like a regular tourist. When I saw people bowing, praying, I didn't laugh at them. I didn't judge. I just couldn't understand how someone could believe with such intensity. To me, it felt more like a beautiful ritual, something cultural, rather than something true. I had never truly believed the soul was real. Death was the end. Or if there was anything after, it was too big of a mystery to grasp, so I chose not to ask. There were moments during unusually quiet nights when I felt an odd emptiness inside, like something was missing, something I couldn't name. But instead of exploring it, I would just put on some soft music, meditate for 5 minutes, then go to sleep. And so I chose busyness. I chose to normalize everything. I kept telling myself, I'm fine. Until one day, life no longer gave me the luxury of putting it off. The fateful day, earthquake in Myanmar. I arrived in Myanmar on a weekday carrying a small suitcase, a camera, and a soul searching for inspiration long lost. After nearly 3 decades of living in a kind of stability that had turned stale in America, I longed for something different, not a reckless adventure, but a kind of quiet newness. Just enough to awaken emotions that had long been asleep inside me. Myanmar drew me in with its stark contrast, the dusty streets filled with movement, and the solemn, sacred stillness of golden temples. Places where people lived slowly, bowed in prayer, and seemed to understand something I had never grasped. I rented a small room near the center of Yangon, within walking distance of the market, the temples, and a modest tea house that I grew fond of after just a few visits. Everything felt so peaceful, so gentle, that I began to wonder if I had finally found the place I was meant to be, a corner of the world that didn't rush me, didn't demand anything of me, and didn't require me to be anyone but myself. That morning unfolded like any other: soft sunlight, a light breeze, and no sign of anything unusual in the sky or beneath the earth. I had just left a small riverside temple where I had sat in stillness for over half an hour. Not praying, just quietly watching the locals burn incense and bow with a reverence I couldn't understand, but somehow envied. I walked into the humble tea house I frequented, ordered the same drink as usual, pulled out a chair by the window, and prepared to scroll through some photos I had taken earlier that morning. I remember the first sensation clearly: a slight tremor, barely noticeable, as if something deep beneath the surface had stirred, making the glass in front of me clink softly. I looked up, intending to ask the staff if a large truck had passed by, but then I saw the change in their eyes. Suddenly tense. Confusion giving way to fear. Everything happened too quickly. The floor began to move beneath us, rising and falling like a massive wave erupting from underground. And no one inside had time to fully understand what was really happening. I heard screams. Chairs crashing to the floor. Ceiling lights colliding with each other, creating sounds like shattered wind chimes. Then came the sound of cracking, sharp, slicing through the air like a blade. A man shouted something in the local language. I couldn't understand the words, but the fear in his voice sent chills through me. I barely had time to grab the edge of the table as the ground shook violently once more, as if a massive undercurrent had struck the very foundation of the entire building. In that moment, time seemed to shatter. The ceiling cracked open. Dust filled the air, and the light disappeared, giving way to flickering darkness as the electrical system failed. I heard something huge collapse behind me. Human voices echoed off one another like sound ricocheting through a cavern. Then everything burst apart like a soap bubble pricked by a thorn. I don't remember how I fell, nor where I hit. I felt nothing, except a strange shift in space, like the world around me was being disassembled, layer by layer, in an instant. It all happened within seconds, but the force it carried was unlike anything I could have imagined, utterly devastating. I had always thought that if I were to die, it would be in some grand moment, or at the very least, with a final emotion: regret, pain, or fear. But when that moment actually came, there were no screams, no tears, no goodbyes. There was only a whirlwind of sound, motion, and then suddenly, silence. A silence I will never forget. Not peace, but an absolute void. A space where every sound, every thought, every feeling vanished all at once. I had fallen into nothingness, not a man sipping tea on vacation anymore, but something far more difficult to describe. The soul leaving the body. I woke up in an entirely different world. I was no longer buried under the rubble. No longer trapped or crushed. But floating, fully conscious and aware. I was still at the scene of the disaster, yet I was no longer a part of it. I saw the shattered walls. The overturned tables. People weeping and desperately trying to help one another. I saw rescue teams rushing in, dusk thick in the air, sirens wailing in the distance. And then I saw my body. It was twisted beneath a piece of metal. Eyes closed. Blood smeared across my forehead. One arm broken at an unnatural angle. Part of my leg pinned beneath debris. I was completely still, no breath, no movement. In that moment, I knew I was dead. And yet strangely, I felt no fear. I felt as if I had stepped outside of fear itself, just as I had stepped out of my body. There was no more time. No urgency. No panic. Only silence, wrapped in the strangest clarity I had ever known. But beneath that stillness, there was something else, a pull. A presence. As though something, or someone, was drawing near. Then I began to move. Not walking. Not even deciding to move. But simply being moved. I rose up and saw the entire scene from above. I saw the panic. The deep fear etched into the faces of strangers and rescuers. I saw people screaming, straining to lift beams far too heavy for their strength. Some were sobbing uncontrollably. Others stood frozen, paralyzed, unable to speak or move. The entire building now looked like a battlefield. Nothing was where it had been just minutes before. Nothing remained intact. I don't know how long I remained in that in-between space, a realm of pale gray stillness. Without sound. Without time. Everything felt suspended. And I no longer sensed a body or any physical surroundings, only consciousness. Bare and silent. And then, from somewhere within that silence, something appeared. Lord, who are you, and are you truly real? I saw clearly the moments when I had deliberately avoided spiritual questions, those times I cut someone off as soon as they began mentioning Jesus, the times I brushed off invitations from friends to attend church or join a Bible study group. I saw myself quietly scoffing when someone prayed in public or posted a Bible verse online, and how a subtle sense of condescension would rise in me without my even noticing, because I thought I was just being rational, scientific, clear-minded. But now I understood that attitude was the symptom of a heart closed off to real life. I didn't feel like I was being judged, I felt like I was being awakened. As if God was saying through His very presence, I don't need you to be perfect, I need you to see. To see that everything I once believed was enough, wasn't. To see that what I used to call modern faith was actually gentle rejection. And most of all, to see that He still loved me. Still waited for me, even though I had ignored Him for nearly my entire life. That realization broke me, not because of guilt but because of a love so vast, so pure, that I had spent a lifetime treating as unnecessary. Right after that moment of encountering Jesus, while my soul was still trembling in awe, overwhelmed and gripped by a wordless regret, something else happened. A gentle yet commanding light surrounded me like a soft whisper, reminding me that the journey wasn't over yet. I didn't hear a voice, but I knew with absolute clarity, He was about to show me what comes next. Not my past. Not myself. But what is to come upon this world, more specifically upon my homeland. Everything around me changed color. No longer the gray-white stillness of before, but now a sequence of images appearing like a living map. And at the center of it all was America. But not the America I had once driven across with the windows down. Not the America I had once felt proud of when I saw the flag waving high. Not the America where I used to sip coffee in quiet corner cafes. No, this was a different America, one writhing under violent tremors. Before my eyes appeared familiar cities: New York, San Francisco, Chicago, Seattle, Houston, Atlanta, Dallas, Miami, Philadelphia, Phoenix, one after another. Not in triumph, but in collapse. I saw the ground split wide open, no warning, no preparation, no time for anyone to react. Highways crumbled like paper, cars plunged into the earth, skyscrapers tilted and then collapsed like sandcastles pulled under by waves. I saw iconic bridges snap in two and fall into rivers below. Neighborhoods descended into chaos. Children screaming in the arms of their parents. Adults running wildly with no idea where safety could be found. There was no electricity. No cell signal. No police or rescue teams arriving. Only screaming, weeping, and the roaring of the earth itself, as if the planet were groaning in agony. But I didn't believe it was nature going mad. I sensed something far more sacred. Like God Himself was speaking to the world. I have knocked on your doors so many times, and this is my final knock. Just as I was still reeling from what I had seen, the vision kept moving. This time I saw humanity's reaction, not just the response of those inside churches, but of society as a whole. I saw the wealthy withdrawing their money in a frenzy, clutching suitcases stuffed with gold and dollars, screaming into their phones as they searched for flights out of the country, though there was nowhere left that was truly safe. I saw politicians holding urgent press conferences, their words firm, but their eyes betraying fear, promising to rebuild a bright future, yet not a single one of them mentioned God. Celebrities went live, broadcasting vague messages about faith, but beneath their makeup were faces hollow with panic and emptiness. I saw crowds gathered around massive screens, hanging on every word of a young man standing on a stage, dressed simply but speaking with striking confidence, as if he himself were the answer to every problem. He promised a new order, peace, absolute security, prosperity. And the crowds erupted into applause, crying with relief. But in their eyes I saw only emptiness, like bodies searching for a soul that would never come. And then I heard that voice, the voice of Jesus. It wasn't loud. It didn't thunder like a storm. But it echoed through every corner of my soul, as if it were etched into me with fire. They cry out to the world to save them, but I am what they need. That sentence tore through the air around me like a sword, not meant to kill, but to sever the thread of deception binding humanity. I couldn't breathe in that moment, not because of a lack of oxygen, but because my heart was breaking. God hadn't just shown me physical destruction, He had shown me spiritual devastation. The internal collapse unfolding across the earth. Humanity, even in the midst of catastrophe, still did not repent. Did not pray. Did not seek the one who had created them. They ran to money. To science. To technology. To new so-called saviors. But no one ran to God. And as I watched it all, I came to understand the most painful truth. Indifference itself was the greatest earthquake. Not the trembling of the earth, but the silent collapse within the human soul, something no seismograph could measure. Yet it was the very thing killing this world day by day. I stood there, unable to do anything but witness it. And it felt as though my soul was being torn apart, because I knew I had once been just like them. I too had chased after things that could never save me. And if God hadn't pulled me out of death that day, I would likely still be smiling at the world, completely blind to the truth. I thought the vision would end after what I had just witnessed, America trembling, millions in panic, cities collapsing like sandcastles. But Jesus remained. He didn't leave. His presence alone made it unmistakably clear, this was not just a revelation to be quietly reflected on. This was a mission. A warning handed to me directly. He looked at me with that same gaze, full of love, but also solemn, and then he spoke. You must tell them. There is still time to turn things around if those who are lost return to me. But time is running out. This is only the beginning, and it will not stop. I am what they need. And I am the only refuge when everything else falls apart. I was no longer just an anonymous traveler in Myanmar. I was a witness, called to speak truth while there was still time. I thought of America, my homeland, and a deep ache pierced my chest. Not because of the buildings that would fall, but because of the souls slowly dying in spiritual blindness, unaware of what they were losing. They weren't intentionally rejecting God, they were just too busy, too distracted, too invested in the things the world praised. And I saw it clearly. Indifference is the first crack. Then comes complacency. Then trust in what is false. And finally, complete silence in the face of heaven's call. I used to live that way. And if it hadn't been for the earthquake that day, if it hadn't been for this encounter, I might have died never knowing the truth. But now I have seen. And I cannot stay silent. God did not choose me because I was good. He chose me to prove this. No one is ever too late to be awakened. And no one is ever too sinful to be used as a trumpet of warning for others. Then he stepped closer. I can't describe what happened next in ordinary words. It was as if he placed something into my soul, a message, a responsibility, perhaps an anointing. I don't know what to call it, but it was heavy, holy, and so full of love that it would have made me collapse if I had knees in that moment. I cried in the presence of it, because it wasn't just about me. It was about all those still asleep, still lost, still searching in the dark. Jesus looked at me one last time, his eyes now filled with urgency. Not panic, but a deep awareness of time. Of how close we are to something the world is not ready for. Tell them I am real. And my house is still welcoming the children who have not yet awakened. Before I could respond, before I could ask for just one more moment, it happened. I was pulled away instantly. The beauty, the stillness, the presence, all vanished. Pain returned like fire rushing through nerves that had been numb for too long. My lungs screamed for air. My eyes opened in the midst of chaos. Light. Noise. Screaming. I was surrounded by rubble, dust, and the frantic shouts of medics. My body was shattered. Weak. My head thudding violently. But my soul was alive, more awake than ever before. And I knew why I had come back.